Israel-Palestine War. In a world where fear takes root, the Israel-Palestine conflict stands as one of the most terrifying, pressing, and divisive issues of our time. From the devastating loss of innocent children to the waves of suicide bombings, targeted killings, and violent clashes, this heart-wrenching war is coming to no end. Before we move on to what is happening these days, let me turn the pages to the dimly lit history of the conflict. Background. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a long and complex issue. It began in the late 19th century and went through many phases. During the early 1930s, Arab nationalists like Syria's Sheikh Izzeddin al-Qassam converged on Palestine as a rallying point. He initiated the 1936 Arab Rebellion by establishing a radical organization known as the Black Hand. The death of al-Qassam at the hands of the British in late 1935 only served to inflame the situation further. In 1936, these tensions erupted into the originally non-violent Arab general strike and universal boycott. However, violence broke out almost immediately, setting off the Arab Revolt of 1936 to 1939 in Palestine. The insurrection was brutally put down by the British, with help from auxiliary forces such as the Jewish Settlement Police, Jewish Supernumerary Police, and Special Night Squads. The British were able to destroy most Arab factions and drive many Arab leaders into exile during the first round of conflict, which lasted until early 1937. The Peel Commission was formed to suggest a strategy for splitting Palestine as a response to the unrest. The Palestinian Arabs, however, ultimately rejected this proposal. While Chaim Weizmann and David Ben-Gurion, the two most prominent Jewish leaders, approved the Peel Commission's recommendations, other Jewish leaders voiced their opposition. After the initial period of violence, which continued sporadically until the outbreak of World War II, the conflict resulted in approximately 5,000 casualties, with most of them being on the Arab side. When World War II began, the situation in Mandatory Palestine began to calm down. This relative calm allowed for a shift toward a more moderate stance among Palestinian Arabs, especially under the leadership of the Nashashibi clan. During this time, something interesting happened. The Jewish Arab Palestine Regiment was formed under British command, and they found themselves fighting against the Germans in North Africa. This joint effort marked a significant departure from the previous hostilities. However, there was a more radical faction led by al-Husseini that had been exiled, and they leaned toward cooperation with Nazi Germany. They even played a role in establishing pro-Nazi propaganda across the Arab world. Nevertheless, al-Husseini's ability to operate in Palestine was limited due to his relocation to Nazi-occupied Europe and the defeat of Arab nationalists in Iraq. As World War II ended, a crisis emerged regarding the fate of Holocaust survivors from Europe. This crisis reignited tensions between the Yishuv Jewish community in Palestine and the Palestinian Arab leadership. The British imposed immigration quotas, and on the other side, illegal immigration and Zionist insurgency against the British were on the rise. This complex period further shaped the dynamics in Mandatory Palestine. The United Nations General Assembly approved Resolution 181-2 on November 29, 1947, which proposed partitioning Palestine into Arab and Jewish states, with Jerusalem as the capital of each. The next day after this judgment was made, riots broke out in Palestine. After then, for the next 4 months, the Yishuv Jewish community in Palestine was mostly on the defensive, but there were sporadic retaliatory actions in reaction to continued Arab provocations and attacks. The Palestinian Arab Army of the Holy War, commanded by people like Abd al-Qadir al-Husseini and Hassan Salama, received assistance from the Arab League, which in turn established the volunteer-based Arab Liberation Army. Jewish underground forces like the Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi ran the show during the Civil War. Jewish World War II veterans and international volunteers bolstered these organizations. Palestinian Arab refugees became a major issue, as it became clear in the spring of 1948 that Arab forces were in trouble and Yishuv troops were gaining territory. In the years leading up to the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, this was a pivotal time. History of the conflict. In 1947, the United Nations proposed dividing the land into Jewish and Arab states. This led to the creation of Israel in 1948 and the First Arab-Israeli War. The war ended in 1949 with Israel's victory, but many Palestinians were displaced, and the territory was divided into Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. After the Suez Crisis and Israel's invasion of the Sinai Peninsula in 1956, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria signed agreements to defend each other in case of any fighting. They did this because they thought there might be more conflicts in the future. In June 1967, things got really intense when Israel launched a surprise attack to kick off the Six-Day War. As a result, Israel conquered the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank, East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt. 6 years later, the Yom Kippur War, or the October War, unfolded as Egypt and Syria launched a surprise two-front attack on Israel in an attempt to regain lost territory. This conflict did not lead to significant territorial changes, but it opened the door for negotiations over previously ceded land. In 1979, after years of ceasefires and peace talks, representatives from Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords, a historic peace treaty that marked the end of a 30-year conflict between Egypt and Israel. The problem of Palestinian self-determination remained unresolved, despite the fact that the Camp David Accords improved relations between Israel and its neighbors. Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip launched their first major revolt, known as the Intifada, in 1987. The Oslo I Accords were signed in 1993 and established a framework for Palestinian administration of a portion of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. As a part of Oslo II, signed in 1995, Israel agreed to withdraw from even more West Bank territory. Now, what happened next? Discontent with Israeli rule in the West Bank, the breakdown of peace talks, and Ariel Sharon's visit to a holy Islamic site all contributed to the outbreak of the Second Intifada in 2000. The year 2005 marked the end of this battle. Israel's answer was to begin construction of a wall around the West Bank in 2002, despite protests from international organizations. After sweeping Palestinian elections in 2006, Hamas replaced the long-ruling Fatah party as the ruler of the Gaza Strip. Hamas is a Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood-affiliated political and militant organization. Because of its reputation as a terrorist group, Hamas's victory was rejected by the United States, the European Union, and others. Conflicts broke out between Hamas and Fatah as a result. Fatah and Hamas reconciled and created a unity government in 2014, following years of unsuccessful peace talks and conflict. In 2014, there were intense clashes between the Israeli military and Hamas in the Palestinian territories. Hamas fired thousands of rockets at Israel, and Israel responded with a major offensive in Gaza. The conflict ended in August 2014, resulting in casualties on both sides. In 2015, violence continued between Israelis and Palestinians. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas announced that they wouldn't be bound by the territorial divisions set by the Oslo Accords. In 2018, Palestinians in Gaza held weekly demonstrations at the Gaza-Israel border, with a major protest marking the 70th anniversary of the Nakba, a Palestinian exodus during Israel's formation. While most protesters were peaceful, some clashed with Israeli forces. Many were injured and some lost their lives. Despite efforts to unite Palestinians under the Palestinian Authority, disunity persisted between Fatah and Hamas, with Fatah on the West Bank and Hamas ruling Gaza, which remained the case into the early 2020s. After these events, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict continued to simmer with occasional flare-ups. Efforts to reach a lasting peace agreement faced numerous challenges, and the situation remained complex and unresolved, with both sides holding firm to their positions. Tensions periodically escalated, leading to further clashes and violence in the region, making it a persistent issue in international affairs. Considering the long history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, what role do you believe the international community should play in finding a solution to this ongoing issue? What is the Gaza Strip? Now let's explore the unique history of Gaza, a small but densely populated piece of land caught between Israel and the Mediterranean Sea, with a brief border shared with Egypt. Gaza, a small piece of land, sits between Israel and the Mediterranean Sea, and it has a short border with Egypt to the south. It's only about 41 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide, but it's home to over 2 million people, making it incredibly crowded. In the past, Gaza was under Egyptian control for about 19 years after the 1948-49 war. Later, in the 1967 war, Israel took over Gaza and stayed until 2005. During its occupation, Israel established Jewish settlements. However, in 2005, Israel withdrew its troops and settlers from Gaza, but it retained control over the airspace, borders, and coastline. The the United Nations still officially regards this territory as occupied by Israel. Wars on the Gaza Strip. Many Palestinians, including children, have been killed, and tens of thousands of buildings, including homes and schools, have been destroyed as a result of Israel's 4 prolonged military campaigns in Gaza: 2008, 2012, 2014, and 2021. Due to the blockade, vital building supplies like steel and cement cannot enter Gaza, making reconstruction an enormous struggle. Reports of the use of prohibited weapons like phosphorus gas surfaced in 2008. Over 2,100 Palestinians were killed in the 2014 attack known as Operation Protective Edge, including 1,462 civilians and over 500 children. About 1/5 Palestinians now have nowhere to live after many were hurt and 20,000 homes were destroyed. Concerns. As the conflict between Israel and Hamas flared up on October 7, 2023, here's a snapshot of the immediate international responses and concerns. When hostilities broke out between Israel and Hamas on October 7, 2023, President Joe Biden quickly declared his support for Israel. The United States has announced the shipment of armaments and has brought warships closer to Israel. The UN Security Council met in an emergency session, but members were unable to issue a joint statement. Fears grew for the well-being of innocent bystanders and hostages. About 800 Israelis and 500 Palestinians died in the first 2 days. The mounting death toll is a serious cause for concern in this war. There are reports that Iran may have assisted Hamas in planning the October 7th attack, although the United States didn't immediately confirm this. Iran has a well-established relationship with extremist groups like Hamas. The worry is that this attack signals Iran's readiness to increase its influence in Middle Eastern conflicts. There's also concern that Hezbollah, another extremist group backed by Iran, might get involved, expanding the conflict beyond Israel and Palestine. On October 9th, it was reported that the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, were firing at targets in Lebanon, where Hezbollah is based, but the purpose wasn't clarified. In 2023, the United States tried to broker a peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. However, the October conflict disrupted this effort. Saudi Arabia has always advocated for the rights and safety of Palestinian Arab populations, especially in Gaza. Now, these populations are on the path of IDF operations, putting progress between Israelis and Saudis at risk. Recent developments. Let's look into why the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has gotten so much worse recently. One of Israel's most conservative and religious governments, led by Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu and the Likud party, took office in late December 2022. This coalition's membership comprised ultra-Orthodox and far-right groups, some of which support expanding Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Daily clashes and Israeli military operations increased tensions between Israelis and Palestinians throughout 2022 and the first 9 months of 2023. Israel has given the green light to the construction of thousands of settler homes, which are against international law. They used raids and missile assaults as well. Israel and Gaza militants engaged in a 5-day fight in May 2023, during which many missiles were fired. The Jenin refugee camp was the site of a large-scale operation by Israeli forces in July, which included the deployment of troops and the use of drone strikes. Hamas launched an attack on Tel Aviv as a result of the upsurge of hostilities. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict rose dramatically in October 2023 when Israel went to war with Hamas. What obstacles and potential solutions do you see for obtaining permanent peace in the region in light of the recent escalation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Let us know in the comments below. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you in the next of Earth Basics.